Thank you for joining us for our Public Interest Law Career Path panel. This is our yearly panel where we gather a group of dedicated public interest lawyers to share their experiences in public interest law. Our panel includes legal aid attorneys and government. We have Adam Gross, who's the Director of Justice Reform and Police Accountability and Staff Counsel at BPI. Aneesha Gandhi, who's the managing attorney at the National Immigrant Justice Center, and Elise Robie, who's the attorney at the Cook County Public Guardian in the Adult Division. So thank you three for joining us. Before I ask them to introduce themselves, I want to, as I've been doing with these larger panels, I just wanted to lay out some rules for everyone. So please, I'm going to ask questions until around 12:30, and then I'll ask you all to ask the questions. So please send me, use the chat box to let me know if you have a question, and I'll call on you to turn on your video and ask a question. I did get a couple questions in advance, which is great. So I will leave it to those Pili interns to ask those questions, but not too many. So please think of your questions to ask our panelists. So first, thank you three for joining us. Let's start by, if you can all introduce yourself, share a little bit about your organization, and then your role at the agency and any major relevant past positions to kind of give us context to your position. So Aneesha, do you want to start us off? I think I can unmute you too. Nope, that didn't work. There we go.
Okay, good. Sorry. I'm using two screens and my mouse, I can never find my mouse. So I apologize for that. I'm Aneesha Gandhi. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the managing attorney at the National Immigrant Justice Center's LGBT Immigrant Rights Initiative. So I work primarily with LGBT individuals, whether that be like asylum seekers, refugees, or just immigrants who are, let's say, doing a family petition or something like that. But most of my work actually is with asylum seekers in the detention context. So our project is mostly local, but we also do national work, and the way in which we do our national work often is with the help with pro bono attorneys. So attorneys at larger firms that you know, are willing to give their pro bono hours to working with immigrants, working with asylum seekers. And so we, that's how we kind of do our national work, and we do appeals in that way. And then locally, we do a lot of detention work at the local jails that hold, that have ICE detainees, which is immigrant, I'm sorry, the ICE stands for, my God, my head is Immigration and Customs Enforcement, as many of you probably already know that. And so the organization, the LGBT project, I'll just for short, we kind of do a little bit of what all the other projects do. So we do a little bit of litigation, as I mentioned, with our appeals. We do direct services. We work with our policy team whenever there's an issue, let's say with somebody being prolonged detention for an LGBT individual. We work with our policy team to try and get them out. And we do like general educational stuff too for different communities and community services. I've been at NIJC for almost 7 years now, so most of my career has been at NIJC. I went to Northeastern in Boston, so I did a lot of internships, what we call co-ops there, through Northeastern. So I did all of my internships, and I guess we can talk about that later, but most of the reason why I'm in immigration is because of those internships, one of them being with NIJC. So the fact that you all are in internships is great. I think it's probably the #1 reason why I was able to get the experience I had before I started my job, and also get the job that I do have right now, first starting out as a staff attorney and moving my way up. But I think I covered everything. Hopefully I did. I welcome questions. Thank you.
Elise, let's go to you next.
All right, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So hi everyone. It is kind of weird not seeing people, so I'm just gonna roll with it. I am an attorney with the Cook County Public Guardian's Office, the Adult Division. I've been working there since September, so I'm in my first year of practice there. The Cook County Public Guardian's Office has 3 different divisions actually. There's the juvenile division that works with children and young adults. There's a domestic violence division that works with children that are in kind of more contested cases, with child custody cases. And then there's my division that I work in that works with adults with disabilities and seniors. My role as an attorney at the Public Guardian's Office is to kind of lead the many different departments there, as we are the court-appointed guardian for people, adults with disabilities. So we're either, the plenary guardian, limited guardian of the person. So we're managing estates and people's medical and personal matters. If you're not familiar with guardianship, that's going to include, so the guardianship of the person is going to cover any kind of, medical decisions, placement decisions, those kinds of things, end of life decisions, implementing DNRs, et cetera. And then the estate side is going to cover any legal decisions. So we're doing a lot of number work, which who knew that I would be doing so much math as an attorney, but here I am. And I like it. And let's see, I'm selling real estate, selling property, doing funeral and burial contracts, all kinds of contracting, negotiating with nursing homes for their contracts, all kinds of different things. Basically anything that's going to fall under their personal or financial and legal needs, we're going to be handling most likely. It's been a really cool role, as we are a big team organization. So I don't, make a lot of sole decisions. It's a decision-making process with all the various departments. So it's been a really wonderful place to work. I also do a little bit of financial exploitation work there. There's a whole separate, little smaller group there that works on financial exploitation, which is a little bit of what I did in my prior role at the Center for Disability and Elder Law. I worked there for probably 4 years prior to coming to the Cook County Public Guardian's Office. I worked there as an intern. I had a fellowship in my 3L year, and then I was lucky enough to get a fellowship through Equal Justice Works AmeriCorps, doing adult exploitation work there. And so I built up this program there at CEDL called the SAFE program, in which I worked on adult financial exploitation specifically. So I worked there for a number of years and then moved over to OPG. So CEDL, Center for Disability and Elder Law, is a organization that works with seniors and people with disabilities. So you're going to sense a theme in my career. And they do all kinds of really great work. They do housing work. They do powers of attorney, so a lot of it, advanced directive type stuff, wills. They do kind of basically any type of, a lot of different legal work for seniors and people with disabilities. A lot of really low income folks are served by them for a smattering of different issues. And then before that, my Pilly internship was actually with Access Living, which is another wonderful disability organization. So I did, when I was an intern there, I worked on reasonable accommodation work. and stuff like that. It's been a couple years since I've done that, so I'm trying to remember what exactly, but it was a lot of like I redid a manual for them there on reasonable accommodation. And it was a lot of like really heavy disability law policy type work. And that was really cool to kind of see how they do it was a lot more policy heavy and housing type work at Access Living. So I'm happy to be here, and I'm going to turn it over to Adam because I've been talking a lot.
Yes, thank you. But great background. Adam, please.
Thank you. I'm Adam Gross. I use he, his pronouns. I work for an organization called BPI, which sort of stands for Business and Professional People for the Public Interest. I always feel compelled at the beginning to say it's the worst name of any organization, like maybe in the universe, for a bunch of reasons, including that it makes it sound like we do the opposite of what I think we do, and certainly what we aspire to do. Pretty much all of our work is in collaboration with community-based organizations. I remember a while ago getting a call from a potential intern who knew the name of the organization and said, I'm so happy finally to find an organization that represents the needs of business people. And I was like, so there are these things called law firms, and that's kind of what they do, and we do something else. So we are a law and policy organization, and we provide legal assistance and policy support to organizations that are working to make systemic change in a number of different areas. Right now, I direct BPI's Justice Reform and Police Accountability program. A big thrust of our police accountability work, which is what I spend a lot of my own time on, is working with a coalition of community-based organizations that is very focused right now on passing an ordinance that will really transform significantly the way the Chicago Police Department is run, how it's governed, how police department policy gets made, and how policing works at the police district level. It'll make a bunch of changes that will give lots more power to communities in the work of policing. It'll make policing vastly more democratic than it is today. I've been working on justice reform and police accountability for the last 6 years. Before that, I spent about 10 years at BPI working on affordable housing. That was a range of different work at different times, sometimes very focused on policies and programs to create more affordable housing, sometimes very focused on preserving affordable housing in places where it was being lost, and generally doing work to strengthen communities that already had a lot of affordable housing, but might be facing other challenges. And before that, I worked mostly on public housing issues at BPI. I've been there now for a total of 25 years, because I graduated from law school when I was 8, so I was able to do that. And I think the most important thing in my history is that I started off at BPI as a Pili intern after my first summer in law school. So either the good news or the bad news for all of you is you may have just begun a lifelong relationship with some great organization.
Great. Well, thank you, Adam. And thank you, everyone. So my first question, there are a lot of myths and beliefs about a career in public interest law, and some are inaccurate, some may be inaccurate. So I wondered if we could talk a little bit about those myths of being a public interest attorney, and what you found true and what you found false. Aneesha, maybe let's start with you again.
You know, I saw this question and I was like, I hope somebody else has a good answer for this. I think, I think maybe when I was in law school, I went to a pretty like public interest oriented law school, so I didn't see this as much, but I heard, a lot of people who were interested in doing firm work that like, that's where all the smart people go or something, is that like, that's where they all go. That's where all the brain power goes. And, that was not a great way to feel when you went to school to do public interest work and found yourself to be just as intelligent as your colleagues or your peers at school. But I think that while I kept that in the back of my mind, that wasn't actually the real. Some of the most intelligent attorneys I know work at firms, but I also know a lot of really intelligent attorneys that work and have dedicated their lives to public interest. A lot of the NIJC like directors have been there for their whole careers or the majority of their careers. And I could see myself doing the same thing. So that was one myth that I really hope that is not still, perpetuated among law schools. But I really think, people go into firm life for different reasons, and there's nothing wrong with going into that work, just as people go into public interest. And I think whatever one you do, as long as you still view your law degree as like an ability or a tool for change, for positive change, to support your communities that you belong to or that you live near, or I think that regardless of which way you go, I think that that's something to just keep in mind always, that we have such a powerful tool at our hands when we become attorneys, that I hope everyone uses for good, even if it's not always in the public interest, right? If it's, regardless of what you end up doing. But that was one myth that I wish somebody had told me that's nonsense.
Elise?
I don't know if I have a great answer. Or like I'm trying to think of specific myths that I'm like that are out there. I guess one thing I think it's probably pretty easy to like box yourself into one area. But that's true, I suppose, of like any kind of career. I think it can be easier to do probably in public interest because there are some like pretty subject area specific practices that folks get used to. Like I have a colleague that just started who had practiced in mortgage foreclosure law for a long time because she had a fellowship doing that. And so she's like, knows all about that and has kind of struggled in learning, not struggled, but like it's just kind of taking some time to like learn other areas. But she's like learning just fine. And the practice is the practice of law because it does take time to learn various other areas, and you can do it. It just takes you just need to actually go through those skills and learn them from somebody that's willing to walk you through them. What other myths? Maybe like financial aspects is really a big one. That was one reason that I think some people might, like my mom was really nervous about me going into public interest law, even though like I was like, Mom, this is the only reason I'm going to law school. Like I don't have any other desire other than to be in public interest. I probably, because I was a paralegal actually before law school, I would have made way more money probably doing that right off the bat than I was. But I have found like Loyola does a loan assistance program that like helped me pay for a couple years worth of loans right off the bat, as long as I was like working for a specific type of organization. So they helped out for a couple years. And then you know, as long as you go through that process appropriately with your loan provider. I'm not giving any loan advice by any means, but like it is possible. You just got to make sure you do your research. And I've never felt like I'm living like I'm like a poor person. You know, that's not the right word, but I haven't felt like I'm struggling by any means because of my career choice. So I just think as long as you do your research and don't take out like millions of loans, you're fine. That's all I got, Brent.
Adam, do you have myths? And maybe even talking a little bit about the financial stuff too would be good now too.
Sure. I'll add quickly 3 myths to what Aneesha and Elise have said. First, I think there's a myth that, this is related to something that Elise said, there's a myth that firms provide better training than public interest jobs. And I think there is a very limited sense in which that's true and a huge way in which it's not true. So the limited sense in which it may be true is firms have more money and more resources. So they can do more structured, traditional kinds of training things. But it's also the reality that in lots of firm jobs, you'll spend your first several years doing things that, like, you know, tasks that might be best performed by trained gerbils or something. And if you're doing public interest work, you on day one are going to be thrown into the middle of incredibly difficult and challenging stuff, because everyone who you work with has to do that stuff in order to get the work done. You are likely to be at a place where you're going to have supportive colleagues who can help you, not necessarily in the kind of formal, providing the kind of formal training that you would get at a firm, but through real meaningful mentorship, and through that combination of working with your colleagues and just being thrown into the middle of very difficult stuff right away. I think people who do public interest work tend to learn a lot more quickly than people who work for firms. So that's one myth. Maybe a related point is this notion that working for a firm is harder than working doing public interest work. If anything, I think the opposite is true. You know, you're always working with fewer resources. You're more likely to be working in an environment where there is not great law and you're having to create it. So in every respect, you have fewer tools to work with, and so have to work, you know, twice as hard and a lot more creatively in order in order to win. So it's I think more difficult in every way. You know, you're going to be working the same kinds of hours as people who are working for firms, and with similar or greater stresses. Third myth that I know, something I definitely believed when I started doing work that I came to understand relatively quickly isn't true. I had this notion in my head, as I think many people do, that because people are doing public interest work, that they are good and lovely people. And I think the reality is the public interest world is in many respects as diverse and complicated as the rest of the world. Certainly there are a lot of people who are, I mean, it's filled with people who are high-minded and have great aspirations and want to make the world a better place. And that's terrific. But that certainly doesn't mean that there isn't a lot of dysfunction in public interest work. It's certainly not the case that, you know, that all public interest organizations are run by people who are great managers who build supportive cultures. They're like all of those challenges that you might experience other places. you may well experience in a public interest environment as well. And I think there may even be some ways in which sort of the challenges and dysfunction in a way are even greater in a public interest environment, because you're going to be surrounded by people who are in many respects even more committed to their work, even more passionate about it. The stakes are going to feel even higher. You know, the costs of not succeeding seem even greater. You're likely to have deeper personal relationships with the people or the communities you're working with or on behalf of. And that just, that will make your life vastly better and richer, but it also adds a lot of challenge and stress.
Aneesha, do you mind, I kind of had this financial question later, but since we're talking about it now, do you want to maybe address that and kind of how you've been able to have a career in public interest law, if, you know, to what extent that the myth or in some cases fact that public interest attorneys are paid less than private attorneys has impacted your career?
Yeah, I mean, I think I went into the career that I at NIJC knowing that I would never make as much as many of the people I interacted with daily, all the pro bono attorneys that I work with. But I did get a little bit of a scholarship, so that helped, you know, but I did leave with quite a bit of loans. And then I made sure, like Elise mentioned, like to do my research ahead of time and make sure that I was enrolled properly. And again, I'm not giving any advice either because I don't know all the lingo, I'll be honest, but I made sure I enrolled in the public interest loan forgiveness program right off the bat, that I was income based. I make sure I do my certifications each year just so that I know how many payments are eligible for the number that I need to make. And I still have, you know, three years at least to go. You know, the loans are heavy, definitely. And if the program goes away, I will be honest, I don't know what I'm going to do. But, you know, let's just, my hope is that the program won't go away, obviously. You know, I did the same thing as, I think Elise said, Loyola gives like, for maybe the first few years, gives a little bit of money. So I made sure I knew what those programs were from Northeastern, and I enrolled in them each year. And I did get majority of what my payments were for a year given to me by Northeastern, which was really helpful. And, you know, I think you kind of know going in, I'm sure all of you, since you're already enrolled in school, and if you are, you know, planning on going into public interest, you kind of know already that you're leaving with loans and that they might stay with you for a number of years afterwards. But, you know, keeping consistent, you know, doing your research like Elise mentioned, and then just making sure you make those payments, like don't miss those payments. You know, that's the one payment I don't miss. I'm not late on at any time. And, you know, I definitely, you know, you do make less, right? I don't know what the number is right now for firms, but I made significantly less than that from what I remember starting out. But, you know, because I've been at NIJC for a while, you know, I've made it from supervising or staff attorney, supervising and managing, you know, like Elise said, I never felt during that time that I wasn't able to support myself and do the things that I wanted, maybe not like extravagant things that maybe some of my other friends were doing in different fields, but, you know, I feel like I'm able to support myself. And I think, you know, making sure that, you know, you manage, you balance the job that you really want with like whether the pay is enough for you to sustain yourself, right? Because that added stress is not helpful. Like Adam and I think Elise has also said, like the work is stressful. There's a lot more that is on you than maybe somebody at a firm in terms of the responsibilities that you have. And so the added stress of money is, you know, you want to make sure that you're going somewhere where you feel like you're being paid enough to sustain, right? And yeah, that's as much as I can say about finance.
Can I
That's
just
great.
add, Brent, that like I feel like one trade-off of not getting paid, you know, the highest amount is that especially when I was at CETL, I felt like it was okay to take a vacation day, or it was like those benefits I felt like were kind of made up a little bit more with a work-life balance. Like I felt like that was a lot more encouraged, at least in that work environment. Vacation days are always tough, I feel like, as attorneys, because you have to come back to work. But I feel like the work-life balance, especially in public interest, is a little bit more of a, like, that mental health kind of thing is a lot more promoted. So that like helps with the income discrepancies. I really loved what Adam said about the better training. Like it's more real life training. At CETL, I was like able to run my own trial and do depositions, and I don't think that ever would have happened at a big firm. It was terrifying, and like I didn't want to do it, but I was forced to do it because it was part of my program, and I learned so much. I gained a ton of confidence, and like I'm now in court all the time, and it's not even a thing. Like I'm not at all bothered about going into court, and I was totally terrified about doing that before. But you know, as you're one of the only staff people in the office, like, and so that's your job, right? You're going into court as one of the only public interest attorneys in the office, and so it's just something that you adjust to, and you like Adam said, you just get thrown into the deep end. But with, again, the caveat that like you have a lot more understanding people there with the backgrounds, usually to like help you out and to make sure that you're not like gonna fail, or you know, most of the things that you learn too as an attorney is that even like most errors that you make are okay. There's like very rarely something that happens that is catastrophic and gonna like really be the end of the world. So these public interest places that I've worked have always been really great learning environments and very nurturing environments. So I totally agree with everything both of you said.
So I feel like I blinked and it's already 12:30. But I wanted to get to one more question before I turn it off to the interns and fellows who've asked questions. And that's, you know, working in public interest law, we work with clients that have experienced trauma, and that also has an emotional impact on us as attorneys. And so we can even do this kind of quickly, but I wanted to ask you how you all practice self-care, and any tips you have for the new and soon to be new attorneys in the audience on, you know, for them to practice self-care. So maybe let's go backwards. Adam, let's start with you this time.
Yeah, thanks. It's a great question and super important, and there are definitely a lot of people in this work who aren't good at that, and for all kinds of complicated reasons, including that, you know, every day you feel like, you know, if you're not working harder, there's going to be more suffering in the universe. So it's almost like it feels wrong to do that, but that's never a good long-term strategy. I think the only advice that I have, and this is not I'm not trying to avoid the question, just that there's such variation. I think you really have to like know yourself and know what you need, and you know, pay attention to how you're feeling and like listen to your body. Like I know some people who really do feel better when they just kind of double down on the work, and feel like the best thing is to be more engaged, not less. There are other people who are like the opposite, who know that they just need to take breaks from work more often, or they won't be able to do it. And they know that if they don't make the time to do that, their work will suffer and their clients will suffer. So it's not like there's any one right answer. It's just you have to know what works best for you, sort of where you fit. But the most important thing is to know that the thing that Brent is talking about is an issue, and be thinking regularly about what you need to do the best work possible, which for you may sometimes mean taking a big step away from the work for a while.
Great. Elise, what are your self-care? How do you do self-care, and any tips you have?
So this is an interesting question. I did actually recently take like a mental health day because work had gotten so crazy, or so just bananas. So COVID has been really bad for our office. As you know, the public guardians, and the adult division, we've had, I forget the number of deaths, but we've had a large number of our people pass away. In one weekend, I lost 4 of my people. And so after that week, I was just like, I can't do it. Like, I need to take a day off. So, you know, there are some days where you just, and like everybody was super understanding about that, which again, I think is super great. And I think just having conversations about where you're at and trying to promote an open environment is helpful. You know, hopefully more organizations are being better about that. I've started to, since COVID too, I've been able to do yoga in the morning every day before work to kind of get myself started off right. I'm admittedly not good at like getting up from my desk. I was really good at that when I wasn't working from home, but now that I work from home, I sit down at like 8:30 in the morning and often am not done until like past 6 o'clock at night, just because there's so much work to be done. So I think I'm not always good at the self-care, which is why I ended up just needing to take a whole day off. But I get stressed. Like Adam was saying, I get stressed if I'm not working. I feel like that's worse for me than like not doing anything. So, but we are pretty good about talking about it in our office, which is nice.
I have a stand-up app on my phone that tells me to stand every hour and a half, and sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes I'm in the middle of something and I'm just like, turn it off, which isn't helpful.
But it's important, right, to just separate, especially for your eyes. So even if it's just for that.
Yeah. Aneesha, what do you do?
Yeah. So, you know, when I came to NIJC, we were doing trainings on secondary trauma and things like that. And I was like, we need to do more. And so, you know, some of my colleagues and I, we've really tried to, you know, push NIJC, push Heartland, because we're part of a larger organization called Heartland Alliance, to think more about secondary trauma, because all of Heartland's programs, including NIJC, work with individuals who have had at least some bit of trauma in their past or currently dealing with some trauma. So a couple of things that, you know, I do personally is like, you know, I talk openly with my staff about, I go to therapy. Oh, my therapy is at this time, you know, so that it kind of brings a culture, at least in my team, that it's okay to do therapy and it's okay to, you know, say it out loud, or also telling people like mental health days are sick days, you know, and I think that that's not always very clear to people. And then, you know, we started a book club. There's a book called Secondary Trauma, and I'm not going to try and say the name of the author because I always butcher her last name, but her first name is Laura. But the book's called Secondary Trauma, and we started a book club where we like read a chapter or two a week, and then we talked about it. First, it was, you know, after 5, and then you know, because it was so successful, I was able to get us to do it during noon, and then now at 4 p.m. So, you know, just allowing yourself to know what is helpful to you, because like not everybody on staff finds that to be helpful to talk about secondary trauma with their colleagues. But I think going into work knowing what you need. So I knew I needed to be in therapy as soon as my insurance kicked in, so that I had somebody to talk to every week, that it was just about me and it wasn't about work and it wasn't, you know, whatever it may be. And I knew I needed to set times for myself to, you know, think about a vacation. You know, it's hard right now in the pandemic. I know that, you know, 2 of my vacations have been canceled because of, you know, what's going on. But, you know, making sure, and I'm having a hard time with this right now, but making sure you take those time off that you have, you know, allotted to you, if that's what works for you, right? So like Adam and Elise said, like, some people are just, you know, I need to keep working, and that's fine. It's just it's not something that works for me personally. So I just try to make sure that I'm like checking in with myself and checking in with my colleagues. Like Adam said, some of my closest relationships in the last 7 years have been with people that I work with, and have built community with them. So, so yeah, I think it's definite. I'm glad that you asked the question. It is really important. And just, it's the culture of an organization that really, I think, helps foster individuals to feel comfortable talking about it, because I don't know that it's always talked about in the law profession generally. But I think more and more we're seeing the effects of working in public interest, working with people who have dealt with trauma, and then knowing how to take care of ourselves too, as we take care of, or we help support them.
Great.
Brent, if I could just for a
Please.
minute, I want to emphasize the last point that Aneesha made, and it was something that came across clearly in what Aneesha said and what Elise said, and it's just the importance of culture in all of this. It's so easy just to think that, like, you know, because an organization is doing good work or is doing important work, that it's also going to be a good work environment, and that it's going to be supportive of people who work there. And that's definitely not true. Culture varies tremendously across all organizations and across public interest organizations. So there are places that totally understand you know, that the question you asked, Brent, is an important question, and that it's important to support people doing the kind of self-care that Aneesha and Elise described. So just as I would say to everyone, for all sorts of reasons, including for this one in particular, it may be that the culture of the organization that you consider is more important than anything else. Like, you might be better off being in an organization that has a great culture and work that you care about than an organization that does work that you might feel even more passionately about, but isn't going to provide the kind of that supportive culture, because that cultural stuff is going to affect your experience like every minute of every day. And if that's not there for you, no matter how great the work is, it will often be a bad experience.
Great. So let's go to our first question from Shantae Parrish from CGLA.
Hello. I just had a simple question. So Corona has ruined a lot, and I know like a lot of people wasn't able to intern at certain places. Do you believe this would affect people's ability to get jobs after they graduate, since like they was unable to intern at certain places, since a lot of places cut back on the number of interns they was having this summer?
Oh, who wants to take that first? Adam, maybe you're the highest of us all.
And by that you mean just the grayest of us all?
Or with hiring, making hiring decisions.
I mean, I think I guess the good news and the bad news is everyone is in the same position. You know, everyone has had their opportunities limited in the same kind of way. So it's not like there's anyone who's been better able to manage that. So it's like a new challenge, because so much of finding public interest jobs and finding public interest jobs that work great for you are about taking advantage of things like internship opportunities, and there have been fewer of those. My guess is that the upshot of this is it's just going to kind of change the timing of things. Like, organizations are still going to need to hire people. There's more need for this work than ever before, and everybody else who's like in the market for jobs is going to be in the same position that you're in. And what that probably is going to mean is that because people haven't had the opportunity to do more internships, to build more relationships, that there may be some more people who like get it wrong the first time, that wind up at an organization that isn't the perfect fit, just because you haven't had the opportunity to learn as much as you would have if you had tried out more places, done more internships and stuff like that. But again, that's going to be affecting everybody. So I would expect that going forward, we'll see more people like moving around in jobs in their first 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years of work, because they'll kind of be just turning like a full-time job into what an internship used to be. But then eventually everyone's going to get it sorted out, and we'll all wind up where we need to be.
Can I make a quick plug for First 10 Network?
That'd be great.
So I keep pushing the right button, so I can't see.
And
anyway,
we have a happy hour with First 10 next week on Thursday.
Yes. So the First 10 Network is for attorneys in their first 10 years of practice that are public interest minded. So we'll even, get folks that are interested in volunteering, pro bono people, but it's a network for public interest attorneys in their first 10 years. And so feel free to join that network. That can be found on LinkedIn. It's First 10 Network. You can, Brent, I don't know if you want to send out like the contact information.
I can. I think it's also, if you go to our website if you go to the page for the event next week, it links to the First 10's Facebook page.
Well, that's a great way to like meet people in that networking group. But I know that I've seen in the last couple months, like continued job postings through that. I know a couple organizations personally that have been hiring. My organization hired a couple people, like onboarded folks in the middle of COVID. So it's happening. It's just going to be a different kind of approach. So I think you're going to have to become pros at that. And then you're going to be able to be on this panel next year telling people how to get jobs, online.
Great. So in the interest of time, Aneesha, I think I'm just going to go to the next question. So thank you, Shantae. And then Sam Harton had our second question.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. It's nice to be in community with you all. I'm a 2L at Ohio State. Can you hear me okay? Okay. So I'm a 2L at Ohio State. And one of my favorite elements of working in public interest is the supportive and open culture that you guys have kind of talked about. Especially in this period of social unrest. So I'm curious how your offices facilitate political and ideological discourse, support and uplift Black voices during this time, and alternatively, Adam, how your work with policing has responded to the widespread calls for abolition.
Great. Adam, do you want to tackle this one first again? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Those were a bunch of great questions, Sam. Maybe I'll just I'll pick up the last piece, which is maybe most specific to our organization, about calls for abolition. So our work on police reform is in collaboration with organizations around the city. Most especially organizations on the South and West side, and those are organizations, rooted in communities that generally have the worst experiences with police. And within those organizations, I think there are people who have lots of different feelings about abolition. There are some strong abolitionists. There are some people who believe that we need police. We just don't need the police department that we have now. You know, we need something that is dramatically transformed. And so the challenge in that work, and this is work that is now mostly done by our community partners and not us, we support it in a variety of ways, is to make as much room as possible for that debate to happen, and for people to talk through their different views. I think there are a lot of people who, whatever they think today about abolition, love to imagine a world in which abolition is possible. So I think that there's sort of consensus, big picture, long term, that this would be a great thing to work towards. And so no one wants to do anything that gets in the way of that. But then there are people sort of everywhere along the spectrum with regard to what that looks like today. But again, like total unanimity that what we have today is completely failing and needs to be changed dramatically. And so a lot of the focus of the work is in that space where there is unanimity about the changes that need to happen today.
Aneesha or Elise, do you want to address the?
I can. I think you know, there was a group of us that wrote a letter to leadership and was like, we have some work to do in this organization, and you know, it was received really well. And so now we're doing a bunch of roundtables with, you know, of course virtually, but with different staff, whether that be paralegals, our receptionists, and then up to directors. About, you know, what ways in which NIJC can support the movement for Black Lives or Black Lives Matter, and also to acknowledge that we work with a lot of Black individuals, a lot of Black immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers, and how we can best support them in transitioning into this, a lot of them, you know, first time coming here to the country and dealing with the racial dynamics here. How can we be of support to them through that transition? And, you know, I would say that again, it's a cultural thing, right? Like we might not have been talking about it as much as we should have been, but now we're working towards doing that. And the letter, I you know, it was nerve-wracking. I'm a managing attorney, but I'm not a director. I'm not an associate director. I was very nervous as to how the backlash would be. And thankfully, because of the culture at NIJC, I was, you know, there was no backlash that I can at least see right now, right? And so, you know, also encouraging us to recognize that we have a lot of mixed status, you know, individuals in our organization, that, you know, when the DACA decision before it was coming down, how difficult that was for a lot of our staff, because a lot of our staff do have DACA or have family members who have DACA or family members who are undocumented, and just making sure that we're building a culture of support for them as well, you know, as they, you know, as they're dealing with the difficulties of not only working in this, but dealing with it in the family or the personal level as well. And then, you know, recognizing that a lot of us were doing work outside, whether that be mutual aid, doing legal observing, helping with jail support, things like that, that we should be recognizing that work as potentially part of what NIJC does. So we started a hotline for non-citizens to call if they were arrested, so that they can talk about the immigration consequences. We got into touch with the National Lawyers Guild and OCAD, which is a local immigrant rights organization here, to talk to them about how we can support as immigration attorneys to talk to them about immigration consequences of a criminal conviction. So we're trying to do those kinds of things little by little. Obviously, it's never enough, but you know, I'm heartened, and we're actually going to be doing an anti-racism training. We're still trying to figure out the platform for that, but we're going to be doing one of those in the fall. So, you know, different ways I think that organizations, you know, with limited resources can still ensure that they're you know, moving forward the right type of culture within the organization, and then talking about hiring, of course, too. and diversifying our hiring practices.
Thanks, Aneesha, and thank you, Sam. In the interest of time, Elise, if you don't mind if I just go on to the next question, which is asked from an anonymous Pili Fellow who asked, do you have any advice for a Pili Fellow who eventually wants to leave their large law firm to pursue a public interest career? So from someone who has that intention in mind, any advice, or what kind of experiences do you think they should seek out as they're at their law firm or even outside their law firm to help them with that transition? If anyone wants to jump in first.
So I guess in terms of like continued pro bono involvement, there's tons of ways. Like I am still on the CETL YPB board, so that's a great way to continue. Like there's plenty of young professionals boards for many different public interest organizations that you can get involved in. It can be the one that you're on right now, that you're interning or being a fellow for now. If there's a different organization that you're interested in, certainly reach out to them. I am part of the Pili Alumni Network Council, but there also is a YPB for Pili, so that's a great way to continue your involvement. Many organizations have various volunteer opportunities or pro bono opportunities. So depending upon your firm's programming for their pro bono program, like depends on what types of cases they're focused on. I know different firms kind of focus on different things, but that's a great way to continue involvement, and I'll wrap up there.
That's great. And just to make a plug actually for our intern and fellow rep that Pili has. So we each year elect an intern and fellow rep to be on our board of directors and on our alumni council. So that's also a way to stay connected to Pili, to meet other board members or other council members. So you'll get more information from me about that later on, but it was just a easy, quick plug. Adam or Aneesha, please.
Yeah, I'd like to add two things quickly, and they're both advice that I would give equally to fellows and interns. One is try as many different things as you can, unless you've already landed on something that you feel fantastically great about, because it's really hard to know in the abstract what's going to work for you. Different kinds of public interest work are so different. The day-to-day experience of doing different kinds of jobs, individual client representation feels totally different than systems reform work. It draws on different skills, and I found that people are just often wrong when they think they know what's going to be best for them. It's not until they try it that they know what really works best. So whether you're at a firm and doing pro bono work, or in in law school trying out different internships or whatever, try as many different things as you can. Second point, again, that would apply equally to interns and fellows, is to networking sounds like an icky thing, but it's a super important thing, and it's something that you can do pretty easily because there are such strong communities within the public interest world, and they're often kind of like narrow cast communities. When I was doing public housing work, there was the public housing, public interest community, the same thing in affordable housing, and even within affordable housing, it was broken down in different ways. There was a group of people who I got to know when I was doing juvenile justice reform work that's different than the group of people who I engage with around police reform work. When you're ultimately looking to make the either to get your first public interest job or to make a transition from a firm to a public interest job, there's never going to be a time when there are a ton of jobs. So like going after a specific job isn't ever going to be an ideal strategy, but building those relationships, developing those broad networks means that like you'll have someone who's rooting for your success, someone who's invested in your success, and that when there are jobs available, they're going to be interested in helping you to connect to them. So think more about those relationships and those organizations than about specific jobs.
Great. Aneesha, any response to that question or other final tips or thoughts as we close out?
Oh, I just, the only thing I had is like, I remember a lot of my friends, you know, had this thing where they had like a time limit, or like, once I pay off my loans, then I'm gonna, I think the person was talking about moving from one to, you know, so that's just something to keep in mind, because I think if you don't have a time limit in your head, you could just go on forever. But just final tips. I know that it's really hard right now to like find the resources needed. Or the internships needed. And I know, I mean, my biggest concern for interns right now is like they're going to go without pay. And I know there was a lot of momentum around like paying interns, and now I'm not sure where that's going to all go. But like Elise, you know, mentioned, is that, you know, the you know, making sure you're connected to different things. And yeah, like Adam said, networking, however, you know, difficult it can feel sometimes, is really important. Yeah, and if anyone has any questions for me specifically, I'm happy to field those via email. It looks like Adam is too, so, and Elise, so maybe we can share our emails in some way.
Perfect, yes. Anyone who wants Adam, Aneesha, or Elise's email, please let me know. I'm happy to share it with your consent. And thank you three for joining us for our panel. It felt like it was 5 minutes, and here we are at 1 o'clock, so that's always a good sign.